This is Part B of Language Instruction using the Kentucky Academic Standards for Reading and Writing. In Part A, you worked with a group using sentence models and patterns to craft your group's thoughts, and how the central idea of grammar instruction developed in our grammar article. After you've had a chance to view other groups' mini paragraphs, we should debrief this approach. First of all, how much time did we spend defining specific phrases and clause types? How many times were students asked to name that device? Was the writing exercise done using a text that we were going to use anyway? For example, is it worthwhile? Is it related to our content? Was the writing an assignment we were going to do anyway? It's not separate or disconnected from the course. And then finally, is this activity transferable? Can it be used for different types of reading or writing? In your groups, have a brief discussion about these questions, and stop the video now. Sometimes teachers will say their students aren't ready for the activity until they teach them the definitions or the terms first, but the processes behind this activity provide a different view of student learning. Stop the video on this slide and read the quote from Janet Angelillo and discuss with your partners. Angelillo's idea is that we consider letting the kids write and then give them the specific feedback they need. Teaching them the processes first allows them to experience how the words function within and add to the effectiveness of sentences. And then giving them the terminology allows students to develop a schema upon which to hang the term. The word participle is actually meaningful to them now because they've been using it. A group called the New Teaching Partners conducted an extensive study in which they observed classes, surveyed students, and analyzed numerous student assessments and work samples. And they published their findings in a report called The Opportunity Myth. In their study, they concluded that what students needed to succeed were the 4 key resources listed here. Let's review the sentence combining and composition approach, considering these 4 key resources. First, did the activity address grade level reading, composition, and/or language standards? Who was doing the thinking and who was doing the working? Did the students each have an important role, and did it require that they work together? And then finally, did the assignment require students to merely name the parts of speech or apply them in service of analysis? Was it a difficult task, but the teacher believed her kids could do it? Stop the video now and share in your groups, and then whole group, your thoughts regarding the activity with these questions in mind. A common comment after completing this activity is that these 3-sentence paragraphs are much better than the 8-sentence paragraphs that students are sometimes asked to complete. It makes sense because the thoughts of many sentences are actually combined into these 3 sentences. So this is a great example of the importance of focusing on quality versus quantity. I would have done cartwheels in the hallways if my students would have started their sentences with something other than the subject of that sentence. A very common practice is for teachers to provide students with worksheets with sentences containing errors, and then direct the students to find and correct the errors. Well, often the sentences are not connected to any in-class reading or writing activity, or even to the other sentences in the worksheet. Although it can be quite engaging to feature errors in writing, as in this example where a teacher features real-world grammar and spelling issues on her word crumbs bulletin board, it's also important to routinely expose students to well-crafted sentences. You might consider a place in your room to feature nicely constructed sentences that you and your students come across as you are reading in your class. You might also invite students to share sentences that stand out to them as interesting as they are reading, or in this case, listening. This student heard this line from a song written by Pete Townsend and brought it into the class to share the impact of the word choice, the structure, the juxtaposition of ideas. So much is hiding within this sentence. Jeff Anderson, author of Mechanically Inclined and Patterns of Power, notes that the find the errors in the worksheet strategy, however well-intentioned, results in our putting samples of poor writing choices in front of students, missing an opportunity to let them see and interact with strong writing. He advocates for a positive approach, featuring great writing for our students to observe and analyze. In addition to looking for and presenting the students with well-crafted sentences from published writing, Anderson recommends teachers become sentence stalkers. When kids write particularly well-structured sentences in their journals or assignments, he recommends that teachers display them in a special place in the classroom. As he's reading student writing, he puts a star beside the neat sentence and chooses one to display on his star wall each week. He looks for sentences with non-standard usage that seems purposeful. A noun used as a verb, maybe, inverted word order, capitalization of a word that is not usually capitalized, and interesting or unexpected word choices. Sometimes the non-standard usage is actually not purposeful on the student's part, but when the teacher points out the quote-unquote choice to the student and says, "I like the way you used sentence fragments here for emphasis, even though you knew it was not grammatically correct." This positive pointing out of the error often makes much more of an impact on a student than a red circle on her paper. Students are more likely to understand their grammar transgression and remember it if pointed out in this way. Stop the video now and discuss your thoughts or ideas related to Anderson's sentence stalking suggestions. Katie Wood-Ray, author of Wondrous Words, agrees with Anderson. She notes that language is something that gets used in real ways by real people, not a landmine field of rules set up for writers to cautiously make their way around. Language is beautiful, alive, wondrous, and studying the craft of it in use will remind you of this again and again. Could it be that worksheets fraught with errors can seem like a landmine field of rules to kids? Supporting Ray's view of the beauty of language, Harry Noden's book, Image Grammar, describes writing in an artistic manner. He sees writing as a work of art, and each word, sentence, punctuation mark represents a brushstroke that comes together to create a masterpiece. Consider a canvas on which an artist drew 4 identical straight lines. Is there much interest in this composition? Well, Noden would say this is how writing would look with 4 identical simple sentences in a row. Not very interesting. So he suggests ways to add variety in sentences, and he calls these brushstrokes. A way to demonstrate this idea to students would be to introduce them to sentences such as these. The base sentence of "the child ran into the other room" is present in all of the options, but each brushstroke contains something in addition to the independent clause. In brushstroke number 1, information is added to the beginning of the sentence using a couple of ing words. In brushstroke number 2, information is added at the end using an ed word. Brushstroke number 3 contains information at the beginning and at the end, and brushstroke number 4 adds the information between the subject and the predicate. Remember, what we're doing is having the students use the gerunds and participles and become familiar with how they work. Then tell them, hey, you know those ing words we were using? Those are called participles. Please look at the image grammar handout. I'm going to display a picture. With your partner, write a simple sentence about the picture in the space in number 2. Remember, not much detail, just a base sentence. Okay, here is the picture. Now, I use this picture because it's quite engaging. As you can imagine, students, and also teachers, their simple sentences are usually a variation of "the dog is pooping." If you're not comfortable with poop language, you can pair this with a different picture for this activity. One teacher friend of mine uses grumpy cat pictures, so feel free to do that. Now choose one of the brushstrokes and revise your base sentence using the same pattern as the brushstroke you've chosen. Then you would have the students add a second sentence about another detail in the picture using a different brushstroke. These brushstrokes can be posted on the wall so that when students are composing, they can use these models as inspiration for ways to vary their sentences. Let's stop now and take a moment. Remember, here is our base sentence, our picture for our base sentence. And just take a moment, add one of the brushstrokes. Once you've had a couple of minutes to add the brushstroke, stop the video and ask for volunteers to share your revised sentence with your new brushstroke. This exercise could be varied to teach sentence types as well. So we have simple, compound, complex, and compound-complex. You could use the brushstrokes for revision. In fact, it is usually easier for students to revise than compose using the brushstrokes. In this revision process, students would be required to choose particular sentences in their own drafts and discuss with a peer or with you why they chose to revise the sentences that they did and with the particular brushstrokes that they chose. These activities help to reinforce that authors make choices in their writing and help further the instruction in craft and structure of writing. They also provide a more concrete approach to the revision process that can sometimes be a bit amorphous to kids. And you can see how it leads to an analytical approach of viewing their own writing. Reviewing the 4 key resources revealed in the Opportunity Myth Report. How do Jeff Anderson's ideas about sentence stalking and Harry Noden's brushstroke composition and revision processes align with those 4 key resources? How might you adjust these activities or processes for your own students? And what might be some of the next steps with your own students? Stop the video now and discuss with your group, and then share out with the whole group. The revised Kentucky Academic Standards for Reading and Writing offer clarity for teachers in our goals for our students, and in this case in regard to language instruction. Helping students learn to effectively craft their messages and communicate is one of the best things we can do for Kentucky kids.